You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Skills World Live. And for our listeners in England, it's official. The COVID-19 lockdown has coincided with the sunniest spring season on record, which is just as well if you've been placed on furlough and passing the time has involved slapping on copious amounts of sunscreen and topping up the tan. It's also now official that kids in reception, years 1 and years 6, started to go back to the country schools today, the first time in over 10 weeks. Not my 3 kids though. They are in years 3, 5 and 10, so it looks like for some time to come, the far from satisfactory homeschooling arrangements will just have to continue. And talking of home, some IKEA outlets reopened today, meaning that those family arguments and feuds over how to assemble a piece of Swedish flat-pack furniture can once again resume. Still can't get a haircut or a nasal wax though. I'm sure you've started to notice, I certainly have, that some of our esteemed colleagues appearing on our virtual computer screens are increasingly resembling 1970s movie characters, complete with untidy sideburns, hair protruding from nostrils, and an array of back-length mullets that would make the circa 1978 West German football side look like they were sporting one of Shane Mann's, from FE Week, shaved head cuts. It's starting to make me wonder whether the hit TV series Life on Mars was just a prelude, after all, to life living under COVID-19. We're getting really excited in the Skills World Live team on this working Monday because it's our last week of the daily evening shows. Not that we are in any way, of course, bored of serving you. It's been an absolute privilege to broadcast online, the only community radio show connecting the world of FE. After all, with an average of 25 guests appearing each week, the production team at FE News and the Federation of Awarding Bodies has pulled off the Herculean feat of putting on the equivalent of a major FE sector conference every 3 to 4 working days. It's even meant banning my kids from watching Netflix and playing Roblox just in case they cause the Wi-Fi signal I'm broadcasting on to crash. With the lockdown restrictions now being eased and people no longer literally being under a form of house arrest, it does feel like the right time to commence transitioning to a new format for the show. After the next 5 episodes, including this one, we will be moving to Skills World Live Weekly. That's right, folks. Gavin O'Mara, the programme's editor, will be guiding us to a new topical weekly live show with fantastic guests, uplifting house tunes, and of course, those informative and hard-hitting FE debates. And for those of you that have come to depend on the show for your daily #FE workout, have no fear. There will still be over 50 episodes available in glorious playback. Just head over to the FE News website. You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. On tonight's show, we're back again with the crystal ball. This time, we're asking, what does the FE College of the future look like? And to help us with this endeavour, there just happens to be already in existence an independent commission on the future college. And tonight, we've got 4 out of the 12 commissioners on the show. After the news, I'll be interviewing the academic and long-standing critic of FE and skills policy, Professor Ewart Keep. And joining him in the segment will be his fellow future college commissioner, Amanda Melton, the Chief Executive of Nelson and Colne College in the northwest of England. In the middle of the show, our 2 commissioners and phone chat guests will be David Jones OBE, an ex-college principal in Wales, as well as Marie-Thérèse McGivern, who will join us from Northern Ireland and is a former Belfast Metropolitan College principal. Stay with us for the end of the show, when 3 sector experts and leaders will pour over with me what they've heard about the future college, including back on the show by popular demand, Cindy Rampersaud of the awarding body giant Pearson. But first, let's find out what's making the news headlines in your skills world this evening. Secretary of State Gavin Williamson has welcomed the opening of England's primary schools today for reception Year 1 and Year 6 children. Mr Williamson told this programme that his decisions were based on the best scientific and medical advice. He acknowledged that some parents and teachers would continue to feel nervous about the phased reopening of educational settings, but that the welfare of children and staff continues to be at the heart of all his considerations. It comes on a day when the Department for Education in England has issued updated guidance to post-16 providers who are expected to resume face-to-face teaching from the 15th of June. In other news, the Association of Employment and Learning Providers, AELP, have backed down from their threat of legal action against the government over its members' eligibility for continuity payments during the pandemic, known as the Cabinet Office Supply Relief Scheme. The trade body's lawyers had originally written to the Department for Education on the 27th of April, setting out the reasons why it believed ITPs and levy-paying employers should be eligible for the COVID-19 related support. However, the Out Board issued a statement today saying it was no longer pursuing the legal action. The statement said that the association would incur significant additional costs, and even then, no guarantee could be given to ALP's members of a successful outcome in time for them to benefit from any revised scheme. And finally, a piece of longitudinal research into educational enrichment, spanning 4 years, will seek to demonstrate the huge role enrichment activities play in preparing students for employment and careers. The study announced today is a collaboration between the Association of Colleges, the awarding body NCFE and Derby University. The research will also capture the impact of funding cuts to enrichment programmes in further education institutions, while identifying effective models of enrichment and the impact these have on the outcomes for young people. That's all your Skills World news from fenews.co.uk. Contact us at Skills World Live. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @Tom Bewick, @FENews. Use the hashtag SkillsWorld. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111.
Give you
That was You Get All of Me by the artists Catnip and Aston Tur. And as with all our tunes on this show, they are carefully selected from that independent music site of choice, epidemicsound.com. And as it's the start of the new working week, folks, every single one of the songs you'll hear tonight have never been played before on the programme. What a treat. To kick off tonight's big debate, we're exploring from a UK-wide perspective what the future FE College might look like. In spring last year, about the same time as the Auger Review reported in England, the Independent Commission on the College of the Future was formed. It is chaired by the distinguished academic and statistician, Sir Ian Diamond, and its work is supported by an array of sector organisations and experts. According to the Commission's website, it's been set up to answer two critical questions. Number one, what do we want and need from colleges in 10 years' time? And secondly, what changes are needed in order to achieve this? Joining me on the line now to explore the answers to these questions are two of the commissioners. Professor Ewart Keep, who works in the Department of Education at Oxford University. Good evening, Ewart.
Good evening, Tom.
And Amanda Melton, the Chief Executive Officer at Nelson and Colne College Group. Good evening to you, Amanda.
Hi, Tom.
Thanks to you both for coming on Skills World Live this evening. Amanda, let's start with you. As a serving CEO of a college group, what's your answer then to the first of your commission's question? I mean, what do you want and need from your college in 10 years' time?
Well, I'm glad you're asking me today and not 2 months ago. Prior to coronavirus, everything was quite different, wasn't it? And I was indeed slightly sceptical about how colleges would be able to invent a new digital self very quickly, but actually having just done it over the last 10 weeks, along with all colleges nationally, I think that there's some quite exciting things in the College of the Future that we're kind of experiencing now.
Yeah, indeed.
Which are definitely very sustainable and very exciting for students and also for, colleges and the way we work together. So I think that's really great stuff.
Good. So are you part of the Achieve 10 Years of Innovation in 10 Weeks club then? I've heard that a bit on this show.
I think we were kicked into that club. I don't think anybody asked us whether we wanted to be in it, but we definitely were one of those who found themselves suddenly having to jump off that burning platform.
Absolutely, yeah, burning platform, great metaphor. Now, you're a long-standing writer, observer and informed critic of the English skills system. What changes would you like to see that would equip colleges like Amanda's to survive and thrive in the year 2030?
I think in England, the first thing would be to try and find ways to fund and incentivise colleges to cooperate rather than to compete each other to death. And you can begin to see that starting to happen. If you look at Greater Manchester Colleges Group, you look at the West Midlands, you can see groups of colleges that have already worked out that cooperation works better than the Game of Thrones attempt to compete all your neighbours out of existence. So that would be my starting point, is more cooperation, less cutthroat competition. That would help.
Right. And indeed, I mean, on that point about marketisation, I was rereading a little bit of the Foster Review. Some of you may remember that, 2005, which, in some ways actually had very similar terms of reference to, the commission you're now on. And I thought it was interesting because in that review, there was similar criticism of, where the market wasn't working. But equally, there was a lot of criticism perhaps for an infrastructure of quangos and funding agencies, of course, often change every few years, that just haven't really empowered enough college principals and college boards to actually get on and deliver for their local communities. Amanda, do you recognise any of that criticism?
Yeah, to a certain extent, although, I think one of the great things about the kind of independence of organisations is that you do have the opportunity to have that direct relationship with your local community, whether that's the local authority or your employers and so on. But I think, I reiterate Ewart's point really, which is that we need to have some way of organising ourselves so that we can get better value out of the development of those relationships by collaborating more effectively. I think it's been very challenging because the funding position has been so tight that nobody has really wanted to kind of give way any of the opportunities to kind of generate income when your margin is just so tiny. So we need to think about, how we can build a kind of funding system, but also, an ecosystem of colleges that encourages and fosters greater kind of sharing and kind of collaboration and real kind of strategic response across an area, rather than just kind of doing what you need to do in order to get by on that day.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that there's been 33 or so area reviews. I think there's a lot of sense in the sector that they perhaps didn't deliver on some of the issues there that I think both you and Ewart are pointing to, where some rationalisation, some coming together of groups around collaborative structures. Ewart, you mentioned the Greater Manchester example. I mean, it just feels to me that here we are, 2-3 decades on, we're still pretty much talking about the very same issues that, for example, Sir Andrew Foster was talking about back in 2005. That's essentially, what is the purpose of a further education college? How does it relate to its local community and local labour market? How does it work within a system of other FE colleges as opposed to just being islands unto themselves? I mean, do you not sort of share some of that frustration that we seem to kind of keep on having these circular debates? Ewart?
Oh, yes.
Open goal question, really, for you, isn't it? That one?
but being frustrated doesn't really sort of... So, I mean,
sure.
You have to move beyond that.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. There's been a set of constant issues which, for the last 25, 30 years, further education colleges and those who are interested in them have been faced with. And on the whole, we've not been very good in England at resolving them. I'd argue that in Scotland and Wales, they've made more progress in trying to resolve some of the knotty issues about the status of colleges, what their role is, how they can arrive at a colleges that have got a critical mass and are likely to survive financially. And I don't know if you've come across the Cumberford-Little report. This is Audrey Cumberford and Paul Little, two college principals in Scotland who've just written about, in the last month or so, a really interesting report, which is basically in response to a report that was written by the principal of Glasgow University, saying, well, this is what universities in Scotland are here to do in terms of social improvement and economic improvement and innovation. And Cumberford-Little is, well, here are what colleges can do.
Right.
It's a really interesting read.
Well, I'm sure it is. I mean, I'm always interested in what comes out of Scotland. I mean, not least, I also note that the chair of your commission, I think, is the former Vice-Chancellor of Aberdeen University. So, there's a lot of connection north of the border there to perhaps what we could be doing better here in England. I mean, just on the point... Amanda, about sort of teaching, training, learning and assessment, because I noticed that that's one of, I think, the 5 themes that was covered in a progress report from your commission. And it's interesting because it says, changes in the world of work will see an increased need for people to study and train throughout their lives. This will come alongside increased demand for flexible provision systems which facilitate credit transfer and effective use of new technologies. I mean, how relevant is all that sort of post-COVID then?
It's fundamentally. I mean, I
what do you mean by credit transfer in the sort of FE world context? Because it's a word that gets used, but it's got different meanings.
Yeah, I suppose it's about just making sure that you've got currency of unitization of what it is that you can do, so that you can kind of move it around with you throughout your life. I think one of the big challenges that we've got now post COVID, which will be keeping most college principals awake at night, is that we're going to have a significant number of adults in an area who are finding themselves either out of work or with the wrong skills, given the fact that I think the world of work will change in just the same way that the world of studying will change. And I think that working patterns will be different. You might be doing your radio show from your bedroom for the next 10 years, mightn't you? Whereas you might not have thought about that before.
God forbid.
So God forbid, exactly. But I suppose the point is that, everything is going to change as a result of this situation. And, we need to make sure that adults because I don't think we've done a terrifically good job of understanding what the complexity around the lifelong learning package needs to look like, what an all-age career service needs to look like, and so on. So, so if we're all kind of thinking about how to do that, we need a systemic response to it, don't we? Rather than me and Nelson trying to figure out what the adults in Nelson are going to do. We need some sort of different sort of relationship with this kind of policy holders that enables us to be able to contribute to the debate and actually be part of the design of a system that is going to work for those adults.
And whenever you hear the word sort of systemic, again, it's one of those phrases that you hear a lot in the sector, and of course it's been there. I spoke to Philip Auger, the chair of his independent panel that reported about the time that you guys got set up last spring. And I guess the challenge, with some of these phrases, unless people are really very kind of precise in terms of what they mean, is that you get sort of different parts of the sector that read into these phrases in different ways. So you've seen probably recently, that FE Week headline about nationalisation of colleges. I mean, that might be music to your ears, given some of the critiques you've had of quasi-markets in FE in recent years. Other people, I think, are kind of less scared off by some of those phrases. They do go down the sort of more collaboration route, but still think that can operate within a sort of autonomous, semi-autonomous FE system. I mean, where are you on that debate, Amanda?
The nationalisation thing or the privatisation thing or the, bringing it back into the public sector hasn't been central to the discussion, because the point has been about how we make sure that we have a system that actually deals with what the country needs and what each region needs and so on, as opposed to that kind of level of detail. But the important thing has been about how you enable the funding that is available, the capital investment and so on, to get the different institutions, whether they're universities, school sixth forms, FE colleges, to be able to act together in order to be able to respond to what is needed in that area. So it's really much more, it is about system. I think it has to be about system, but that doesn't necessarily equate to the same thing.
No, I'm sure it doesn't. Ewart, last word to you then. You'll be aware of this FE white paper that's already been announced by the Secretary of State. He even called it revolutionary, in quotes. I bet you've heard that a few times from serving ministers over the years. But if he gave you a call, I mean, I've got your number, I could always pass it on to him, and he asked you what the paper should be proposing as a white paper, just give me a flavour of what the Ewart Keep white paper on FE would look like.
Well, I wanted it to start by saying that the government would like to have a more mature relationship with colleges, that it would like to see colleges thinking for themselves and taking the lead, that the government would like to give the space for colleges to start to change the education and training system bottom up, rather than the usual model, which is top down from the Secretary of State. And I think the other thing that would really, I would love to see, and the Commission certainly, would like to see, is a world where colleges are funded to carry out the range of activities of which they're capable, and which quite often they're doing elements of at the moment, but they're not funded for it. And it somehow goes on beneath the funding radar and beneath the performance management radar. So it is things like helping small businesses with business improvement and business support. It's about various forms of innovation, which colleges often help local employers with. It's providing shared facilities which employers can use. Yeah. It's all those sorts of things which in a way we've lost sight of, because the government has come to obsess about paying for students, usually young students, pre-19-year-olds, to go and acquire a specific qualification and a bit of maths and English. And as long as that happens, the government thinks, yes, that's FE's doing what it's meant to do. And that is important, but it's by no means all that colleges could or should be doing.
Okay. Well, it sounds like whatever, it will be a very full white paper, and I'm sure there'll be listeners to this who'll be looking forward also to the Commission on the Future College report. I suspect you'll try and time the publication, at least so it influences some of those developments in England. Alas, that's all we've got time for, broadcasting here from my man cave in Sussex for this particular segment. I don't plan on doing it certainly for the next 10 years. The next 4 days will be worth getting through. Anyway, Professor Ewart Keep, Department of Education, Oxford University, and Amanda Melton, Chief Executive, Nelson and Cole College Group in the northwest of England. Thanks so much to you both for joining the show this evening.
No problem. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick.
If I'm the bad one, take a look at yourself in the mirror. If I'm the worst one, ask anybody else who they prefer. If it comes down to me and you, I think that you are the one with a bad attitude. Why start a conflict? You got no clue. Tell me, what is your problem? All is rules you spread doesn't make you feel good too. Cause bloodshed, 'cause I don't really get it. The rumors that you spread can see what happened. I mean, we used to be friends a while back now. I know you're trapped in, you ran into a deep end, a real breakdown. You are imbued with jealousy. Why would you otherwise be charging so hard at me? Why start a conflict? Can't you see that I'm not your problem? All is rumors you spread doesn't make you feel good too. Cause bloodshed, 'cause I don't really get it. The rumors that you spread, I don't really get it. I don't. You shoot in the dark, 'cause you got nothing on me. You try to light a spark, but I won't fall for that. I won't fall for that. All these rumors you spread doesn't make you feel good too. Cause bloodshed, 'cause I don't really get these rumors you spread doesn't make you feel good too. Cause bloodshed, 'cause I don't really get it. The rumors that you spread, I don't really get it. I don't.
That's Rumours, and it's by Daxton and Way. Now, to continue tonight's big debate, I'm joined by two more commissioners from the independent panel on the Future College. David Jones, OBE, who is the ex-chief executive of Coleg Cambria in Wales. He's a commissioner. And Marie-Thérèse McGivern, who's the former principal of Belfast Metropolitan College. Good evening to you both.
Hi, good evening.
Hi. David, we've got you on the line.
Yep. Hi, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Good. I'm glad you're on the line, David, because you're going to get the first question. Now, that's David, as someone that's still very close to the Welsh college and qualification system, based, of course, on a completely devolved administration approach, Do you think it will be possible to come up with a final commission report that will have a complete read across the four nations of the United Kingdom?
I think it's going to be a challenge, I have to be honest. I think one of the things I said at the very first meeting was that in defining a college of the future, that's probably a task that's impossible. And what's more important is to maybe define the attributes of a range of colleges that matches more with their regions.
Yeah.
So I think then linking that back to your question, and I listened to the first section, particularly some of Ewart's comments around devolved nations, I think it's fair to say that even though things are far from perfect in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, I felt for the last 3 or 4 years talking to colleagues from England that they certainly feel a lot better in the devolved nations.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons for that is the ability to operate at a regional level, which means at a national level in the devolved nations, and to have a collective approach. I think one of the challenges in England is simply that the sector is still so big, even after area-based reviews. And I do think that the ability to work regionally is a really important benefit that devolved nations have. But I do agree, colleges are at different places in different parts of the UK.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to that and explore that a bit more in a moment. I mean, I thought it was interesting recently. I actually interviewed the Minister for the Economy, Ken Skates, who was talking about the system in Wales for post-16 providers and how it's very different from the rest of the UK. Now, Marie, by definition, Northern Ireland has a small population and comparatively few post-16 providers. Historically, of course, it has had access to qualifications that were offered in other parts of the UK, like England, including GCSEs and BTECs, meaning even in a small market sort of place, these courses were viable. I mean, is there anything about this kind of increasing divergence, particularly around qualifications, that you see now going on across the UK, like T-levels in England, that sort of bothers you from a Northern Ireland college perspective?
Well, I think the whole issue of divergence was really, for me, one of the sparks for wanting to be on the commission, because I think there is increasing divergence, and certainly in Northern Ireland we would be concerned because ultimately, many of the awarding bodies are there to, run businesses effectively, and if we are not a big enough market, potentially if the whole of the UK kind of goes in completely different directions, it does put Northern Ireland in a difficult position. So yes, it has been a worry. But I think what has certainly underlaid a lot of the conversations that we've been having in the Commission is that while there are divergences, there are also commonalities across the four nations, and those are the things that we, in a sense, are concentrating on and learning what good and effective practice looks like across those four nations in a way to kind of hold the centre and hold the core of what is further education and what is the purpose and role of a college.
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, talking of sort of commonality, because you're absolutely right, both of you, when you kind of operate the level of policy divergence, it's very clear to see that there's been a lot in recent years. I think one of the reasons why, when I talk to colleagues in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, that they feel their systems are overall more coherent is because there's just been less of a tendency, shall we say, of politicians and policymakers to keep on tearing up the system as well every few years. Quangos being dissolved and then new Quangos in their name sort of springing up, and then they're gone after a few years as well. I mean, interestingly, in England's post-16 skills funding and regulatory environment, actually Ofqual's now officially, I think, the oldest Quango, and it's only been around since, I think, 2008. So that tells you something about the level of policy churn. One of the areas, though, where I guess there is that commonality across the UK will be in areas like developing the workforce and leadership. And again, I note that this is, I think, the third theme of your commission. You talk about recruiting and developing the workforce of the College of the Future. Obviously requires investment, but a rigorous system of continuing professional development. Would you agree with that, David?
Yeah, I do think so. Certainly during my period as a senior manager and a CEO at the college, my focus has always been on that link with employers and supporting the local economy. And I think one of the challenges is, it's changed a lot, is that I think as a leader of an organisation, you have to genuinely believe that. And I know not everyone does share this view. Some people think we're there for communities and wider issues, and that the employers are seen as the private sector and they need to fund in different ways. I personally don't agree with that. And I think if colleges, as many are really supporting businesses in their economy, Belfast Met is a brilliant example in Northern Ireland, then I think you create wealth in your area, which then supports community. And certainly, if you then link that to COVID at the moment, clearly the economic landscape right across the UK and the world is going to change significantly. And one thing that struck me over recent weeks, I've often said over many years that it wouldn't be great if we could hit the pause button every June and do all the things we'd love to do, but we never say we've got enough time to do because we're finishing off one year, having a long holiday, and then we straight back into it. Now, nobody wants the COVID crisis, but it's given us a free pause button. And what worries me in some cases, I'm seeing, but what's really good is some colleges and some college leaders are really grabbing this opportunity as a development period rather than a sort of a downtime to really plan for the future in terms of how they do things, what they do, and looking at the use of technology. Whereas I've been quite disappointed with some of the things I've seen in some colleges where there seems to be a lot of navel gazing going on and people just sort of talking about the crisis rather than showing real leadership and planning for the longer term, because it is a challenge, but there are massive opportunities for colleges, and we need colleges more than ever to be powerfully supporting their communities and employers post-COVID. But we're going to have to change for that. Grow some sectors may disappear, and there will be new sectors as well to support.
Yeah, on your point, though, about needing colleges more than ever, because I absolutely agree with you. I think the truth is we've always needed colleges, and perhaps part of the challenge, particularly around policymakers, has been through the decades, FE hasn't always been given, frankly, the prominent role it should be when you consider the profile of London learners, the millions of learners across the whole country that are served in their communities every year. But do you not worry, Marie, with the sort of whole challenge of COVID, which inevitably is going to unleash, at least for a period, very, very high youth and adult unemployment? There's a danger that we get into very structural long-term unemployment as well. And that historically governments have sort of dumped on the sector, haven't they? They've kind of said to you, look, here's some money, but actually just do very short, sharp, back to work type schemes, just basically help us mop up the unemployment problem for a while. And that hasn't always necessarily served the sector well, has it?
No, it hasn't. You're absolutely right. And I mean, for a long, long time, I think that further education has been the kind of bucket where you kind of go to the well with when there's problems or issues, and you're absolutely right. There's been a major number of short-term initiatives, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and then that disappears, and then, the crisis is over and we move on. I think that the COVID situation gives us, as David said, I think that the more responsive the colleges who are thinking more about their future are the colleges who are now currently saying, well, let's look at the problems that we've solved already. And so for many colleges across the UK, I mean, the response has been magnificent. I mean, they literally have gone from, a classic, you come to college and you learn, to a complete blended learning process, where students are still learning, but online. They've done that really, really quickly. They are attacking the issue. Certainly, I know in my own college, there was a real problem that up to a third of our students simply didn't have the connectivity or the equipment to be online. So solving those problems and ensuring those learners continued. So kind of dealing with that disadvantage and inclusion. And I mean, for me, those are core skills and core abilities which colleges have. But I agree with you that the legibility and the literacy around what it is FE does need to be sharper, does need to be more focused. And I think that colleges, and the Commission is talking a lot about this, that colleges need to be seen as anchor institutions, as very important parts of the communities they serve. And I think, again, we've had a bit of a divergence. In some parts of England, it's been easier. But I'd say in general, colleges in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland are probably, because they are non-departmental public bodies, are more aligned to government policy and have therefore found themselves, certainly I know in Northern Ireland, in much deeper discussions about what their role and function will be post-COVID. And I can see the skills issue, the very point you're talking, the long-term unemployment, particularly among young people, which is definitely going to emerge from this, that we have to have stronger and more radical solutions. And I believe that the college sector is a very strong part of that solution.
Yeah, and last spring, of course, when your commission was set up, the narrative, the macroeconomic narrative around skills and productivity was one around broadly full employment. There's still obviously quite a bit of unemployment around, depending on which part of the country you look at. But, it was all talk of the industrial strategy, fourth industrial revolution. How do we align colleges more to the skills of the future? David, does any of that go away? I mean, is that still relevant, that narrative? Because it was only there still 12 weeks ago. But of course, the narrative now is, how do you bring in or support active labour market policies? And furlough is a great example of an active labour market policy, by the way. But, how do we, frankly, as a country, just face this tsunami of unemployment that's coming our way?
Yeah, I think it needs new sort of radical, innovative ideas for spending the huge amount of funding that's spent on post-16 education across the UK in better ways. I think it's more important than ever to align with industrial strategy. And I think going back to the sort of the theme of this conversation, I think one of the challenges in defining a college of the future almost sort of sets colleges aside as if they're one sector sort of on an island. And I've always felt that was the wrong way of looking at it. And that really we're one part of a system alongside universities, schools and private training providers. And certainly in Wales, I think we've made good progress through the equivalent of area-based reviews. We've now got large, stable colleges performing pretty well across the board. But also the Welsh Government had the foresight to introduce a review by one of our fellow commissioners, Ellen Hazelcorn, a few years ago, which set out proposals for a new post-compulsory body in Wales. And I think that is a crucial thing to make sure in the context of Wales that we're fit for the future. Because the bottom line is we cannot compete within sectors, i.e. colleges, but I also believe we can't be competing like we are at the moment with universities and others. There need to be regional strategies where different types of institutions all have an important role to play. And that will deliver ultimately for the employer and for the community.
Okay. Well, that's the message I think comes out loud and clear, I think, from a number of sector leaders you talk to. Marie, I mean, final word to you. I mean, perhaps you've got some reflections there just on what David said, but I just wanted to ask you about specifically Northern Ireland as well, within the context of, the Assembly government has only been up and running for the last sort of few months. Obviously, the status for Northern Ireland in a post-Brexit UK is going to be slightly different. There's always has been, always will be, that North-South cooperation on education and indeed other issues, as well as the kind of West-East or East-West collaboration with Great Britain. How do you see the future of the college sort of shaping up specifically then in Northern Ireland, Marie?
Well, I think firstly we are delighted to have the Assembly back up and running, and in further education to have a minister. Further education in Northern Ireland is located within the Department of the Economy, so it is very much part and parcel of one of the tools which the minister will have in trying to bring about recovery in Northern Ireland. And I do think that the view on what colleges can do is growing stronger in Northern Ireland with each time. And I know you were alluding, and yes, when we started 3 months ago, it all was about, in industry 4.0, etc. But I think what we are looking at in Northern Ireland is maybe some fairly grim facts around youth unemployment and, long-term unemployment for people who didn't expect it, and also quite heavy redundancies. So the role and function of the college, I think, becomes really, really stronger. But I think the other issue, which certainly we're very involved with as colleges in Northern Ireland, is that we have also a very good relationship with the private sector, particularly SMEs, who are very predominant in the Northern Ireland economy. And I think part of our work, as well as working with individuals, will be to really work with smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses to see that there are opportunities, that they can innovate in their businesses, that they can assist in a sense, the restructuring of the economy and offer pathways to young people and to all people into, a career ladder of some kind. So I think that's a really important role and function for the future.
Okay. Well, I'm sure as two commissioners of the 12 commissioners in total on the independent panel on the Future College, you'll continue those deliberations. I just think it's fantastic also to see that cross UK within a devolved structure collaboration going on. David Jones, OBE, and Marie-Thérèse McGivern, thanks so much for joining Skills World this evening.
Thank you so much for having us.
You're
Good
listening
evening.
to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick.
A million people in the crowd, but I only see your face in all the lights. And as the bass keep pounding on me, baby, I really wanna make you mine. I don't really care about love. I don't really care about happy ever afters. Something about you gives me hope. Something about you, yeah. When the sun goes down and the night sky's falling, do you believe in one-time lovers? 'Cause deep inside of my wildest dreams, you'll be by my side. When the sun goes city dancing through the night, but I'm not there. You've got me soaring in the clouds. And as the ocean is surrounding me, baby, I'm sure we lost track of time. I don't really care about love. I don't really care about happy ever afters. Something about you gives me hope. Something about you, yeah. When the sun goes down and the night sky's falling, do you believe in one-time lovers? 'Cause deep inside of my wildest dreams, you'll be by my side. When the sun goes
The Sun Goes Down by lovely Starlight with Mia Furman from epidemicsound.com. And talking of the sun going down, I was looking out of the kitchen window last night at about 10:15, and I said to my partner, it's still light. I couldn't believe it. Glorious, glorious weather we've been having. Now, to close this tonight's show, the debate about the future college. Great to be joined by three sector leaders. Jamie Smith, who's been on the show before, Executive Chairman at C Learning. Good evening, Jamie.
Hi, Tom.
And Cindy Rampersaud, Senior Vice President at Pearson. She's also a stalwart of the show. Evening, Cindy.
Hi there.
Hi. And finally, Northern Crowther, who's National Official for Post-16 Education at the Association of Teachers and Lecturers. Good evening to you, Norman.
Evening, Tom. Actually, our title's changed to the National Education Union.
Yeah, it's funny. It says here in brackets, and I don't usually read out on this show the brackets, but obviously the production team got that slightly wrong. So apologies for that. National Education Union. That's actually less of a mouthful to say as well, Norman, so thanks for that. Now, Cindy, I think you've been able to listen to the show this evening. What's your reflections on what you've heard from the four College of the Future Commissioners?
So I thought it was a really great discussion, Tom, and I think the things that I've reflected on was, I think something that Marie-Thérèse said, which is that, many colleges have have shown through this COVID crisis that they are, fleet of foot and they've responded incredibly well at supporting their learners. But the kind of key reflections are this need for community, the need to really look at the local ecosystem, working with other private training providers, schools, HE, but really with employability being one of the key drivers. And there was discussion, wasn't there, about the impact of COVID and Brexit. And we know, you talked about this tsunami of unemployment. Young people in particular, they reckon, the Resolution Foundation reckons that as many as 640,000 18 to 24-year-olds will be impacted, and many more adults. And so the kind of cost of all of that for individuals and families and communities and businesses and SMEs is quite significant. And actually, I think there's a really important role for colleges to continue to play, as they always have done, and other training providers, in really supporting young people with learning, which is about progression to further study or HE, but actually also that bit around lifelong learning and adults, and looking at EdTech and online and blended and stackable short courses, and how they really support economic recovery and helping people to get back into the world of work and really restart that kind of ecosystem of kind of micro businesses. So I think, those were some of the key themes that I heard, and the real need to kind of think about the local agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. And that suggests, though, that there's going to be a need also for maximum flexibility, because not every area is of unemployment, every area's particular economy, whether it's in a sense the economy where there are jobs are being lost, but also an economy where new jobs could be grown. They're not all going to be the same, which kind of slightly at odds, I think, from some of the things I heard there from you at Keep about this more sort of nationalised system. But Jamie, Cindy mentioned there digital. You run a company that's all into that scene. I mean, what's your 2030 vision then for the future college, and what's your reflections on what you heard tonight?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of my reflections on what I've heard tonight, one of the key takeaways from me was what David said when he said that he often refers to the need to hit the pause button in FE. And having worked in FE for more than 10 years, I can completely relate to what he's saying, because it's such a rapidly changing sector that has to win its business every month, unlike certain other parts of the public sector, that hitting the pause button, I think it would be, if ever there's an opportunity to do that, then it's right now. And I think the opportunity right now for FE is to fundamentally reimagine its purpose and place in the world. And I would urge people to sort of think big. I mean, I know that other guests have commented on sort of the local side of, and colleges are, of course, immensely connected to their local communities, and that's tremendously important. But this is an opportunity with the technologies that we have today to be part of a global village. There's nothing stopping the College of the Future serving a global community, because at the very start of the program tonight, one of your guests referred to jumping off a burning platform, and I guess a lot of people feel like that right now. But having made that leap, I've always argued you can't leap a chasm in two jumps. You go for it. And so if you're going to make that digital leap off a burning platform, then go for it. And do it in one big go and have a big vision that's bold and courageous. And the other takeaway for me from earlier was the reference made to the Cumberford Little report, which, if you haven't read it, is probably the best document I've read in years in terms of thinking about what the FE... their strapline is agile, collaborative and inclusive. And I think if colleges get that right, those three words, agile, collaborative and inclusive, then it will align to high growth business in a big way as well. Because if you look at things like the LinkedIn jobs report for the UK for 2020 of what the most rapidly emerging job sectors are, they're very, very much fitting with agile, collaborative, inclusive kind of approaches to business models, because they are largely IT, tech-related or financial sector-related, and we need to be preparing people to make the most of that future.
Norman, I see that the General Secretary of the TUC is one of the commissioners. Last week, we couldn't get him on. Sorry, the Deputy General Secretary of the TUC is on the commission. I think the former NUS president's also giving the student perspective. Why then isn't there a workforce sort of representative voice, the National Education Union, for example, on that commission?
Well, it's a good question. Obviously, there were discussions about who should have a place. I mean, there are obviously a number of FE trade unions, and we were quite happy to work together and work through Paul Novak, who's the Deputy General Secretary of the TUC, and and also that has been a UK-wide discussion. And I think that was the time that I began to think that the Commission was actually absolutely sincere about looking at fundamental questions in the sector, such as collective bargaining, which has been probably one of the key flaws in the sector, as well as fragmentation, as to how do you bring together all of these different types of colleges, sixth form colleges, independent training providers. How do you do that and have a coherent strategy? So I think that was the key turning point in thinking that this commission could actually start to answer those questions that you raised before, that we've been circling around. Some have said for over 100 years. So we don't want to do it again.
No, we don't. Now, look, alas, we've come to the end of the show, unfortunately, but I've got 20 seconds assigned to each of you. And what I want you to think of is that 2030 date. And just think, just tell our listeners one thing that you think a FE college does today that they might either not be doing in 10 years' time, or they might be doing more of. So, alas, Cindy, let's start with you.
I think for definite, EdTech and online blended learning, which is really supporting the employability agenda, which will continually change. And I think it's about young people and lifelong learning.
Right. Okay. Jamie, over to you. 20 seconds.
I think they'll bring around the end of distance, and it will be anytime, anywhere, any place learning. And I think that's what the College of the Future ultimately has to deliver. Great.
That sounds like a commercial break. I can envisage seeing that anytime, any place, anywhere. Hasn't that been done before? Anyway, Norman, finally over to you.
Well, I think that the absolute answer to that has to be that it will be seen as a place of vocational expertise led by vocational experts.
Great. God, that was less than 20 seconds. You've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much, Cindy Rampersaud. Jamie and Norman, thanks for joining this evening.
Thank you, Tom.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick.
Nearly put the wrong track on there. Thanks for tuning in to episode 25. Just 4 more of the nightly format left before we go weekly. And as ever, thanks to all our wonderful guests tonight who made yet another informative instalment of Topical FE Debate. Thanks to Gavin O'Mara and our digital producer Ellie Hansen, who always managed to keep the programme's wheels turning. Skills World Live is an FE News production supported by the Federation of Awarding Bodies Platinum Partners Programme. Stay alert, take care, goodbye.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Bewick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News.